Hi, and welcome to Anatomy of a TikTok Trend, hosted by the Go Agency podcast. This mini-series aims to explore the social and creator-led trends that reflected and shaped consumer mood shifts, created conversation, and ultimately broke through the walls of social media to become part of wider culture. In each episode, I'll invite a guest to share their unique thoughts and perspectives on two big TikTok trends from the past 12 months. We'll also discuss some of the more general trends, innovations, and disruptions impacting their industries, as well as a bit about their own career journey. In this episode, I'm so pleased to welcome Sophie Miller, the founder and director of online marketing community Pretty Little Marketer, to explore two very different trends today, Underconsumption Core and Tradwife. So Sophie is best known as the founder of Pretty Little Marketer, a social platform built on the goal of simplifying social media and fostering a community for creatives, marketers, freelancers, and beyond. She has grown this online platform into a huge community of hundreds of thousands of followers, and has also advised on brand heavyweights such as Unilever and Graze to help them build and foster their online social community. So, Sophie, lovely to meet you properly for the first time.
Finally.
I know we've spoken a few times via LinkedIn and things, and I've followed you for a while, so I feel like in a weird way, I sort of know you.
Right? Yeah, I agree.
I'd love to hear a bit more to start with about, your career and how and why you started Pretty Little Marketer.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be on the lineup. I started Pretty Little Marketer 4.5 years ago, and it feels like forever ago, but it's been my life forever, all at the same time. And I was a second year student. It was June 2020, and I went to university at 21. So not too late. Although on my first day of university, on my induction day, I was given a lanyard, and in big green letters at the top, it said mature student.
At 21,
right?
Gosh.
A way to age me, and a way to remind me that, I was late. So even starting my university experience, I feel like I had this kind of internal panic, but external pressure of, you got to figure it out soon. We're in our 20s now. So that was 2018. June 2020, obviously we're in lockdown in the UK. I had just submitted my final assignment of my second year, and I was laying on my sofa. I've got 1 year left. Woohoo, what are we going to do? And I had a pile of placement year job rejections. I had a CV that I didn't know what to do with. And I remember Googling words to use on your CV. And one website was like, yes, use these 3. And then, you go back to Google, you click on the next website, and they're like, oh, no, those are off the cards. You can't use those. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed, but in that feeling so lonely as well. And I'm a Gen Z baby, and my natural instinct was to head to Instagram, select add new account at Pretty Little Marketer, and I guess I just never stopped posting. I grew 1,000 followers in a week, 2,000 in 2 weeks, and by June 2021, a year later, I had 100,000 followers across 2 platforms, Instagram and LinkedIn. And I was graduating university, freelancing for brands like Lounge Underwear, Unilever, Graze, The Masked Singer. So it all happened very quickly. And since then, it's just been a case of saying yes to cool opportunities and like a daily thought of what am I going to do on the internet today?
Yeah. And I guess, were you originally posting like marketing tips and social media tips and things as well, or reacting to campaigns? What kind of content were you posting at the start?
A little bit of everything. I always say that I had this like naive cluelessness to posting. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have any goals. I just wanted to post online to find other marketers who also had no idea. And that goes back to that kind of shared interest of community that I was building without knowing. So in those early days, it was very much like, here's me at university today. I learned about the 4 Ps, and here are what the 4 Ps are. And then, a few months in, when I was a bit more confident, it might be, Victoria's Secret campaign. I think it's okay, and here's why, but it's okay if you disagree. And then, as that confidence grows again, it was more my story, education, here's what you should do because, I'm an expert now, a year in naively. So it very much evolved over time. But yeah, in those early days, it was kind of, what can I post today? What worked yesterday? So a naive cluelessness that I think we lack sometimes as marketers.
Yeah, and I think it really shows as well how we always say this, that especially if you're looking to advertise on TikTok or Instagram and to a kind of younger audience, that you need to have those people on your team or around you, because you just otherwise, how are you going to be able to understand what they're going to engage with?
Absolutely.
And I think it's really sort of changed the dynamic within marketing industries, where you can have people that are 25 years old that are running a team, which I think 20 years ago you just probably wouldn't really have had. And yeah, it's amazing. So, and, brands are always aiming to build community. Why do you think you've been able to cultivate such a successful community? Because you've got like hundreds of thousands of people that follow you and engage with you. And I know you've set up a membership program as well. So how have you been able to cultivate that community?
I love community, and it sounds so like silly and cheesy, and I hate how community, I'd say especially this year online, has just become a word that we throw
Bit
around.
of a buzzword. Yeah.
And I share content about this all the time, about how community changed my life. And the reason I started an Instagram page was because I just wanted to find other people like me. Mm-hmm. And that is the essence of community. So I think that, again, going back to that like naive cluelessness really set me up. I didn't know it then, but looking back now, set me up well, because there was no hidden agenda. It was just me looking to connect with individuals over a shared interest. And when it comes to community and community strategy, because you need a strategy, it doesn't happen by accident and it doesn't happen overnight. I think the key is zooming out to that shared interest. And I use Oatly as an example of this often in my content around how Oatly provide and they sell dairy-free alternatives. But if you look at their Instagram, you'll see their product shots, maybe one every 10 posts.
Yeah.
But actually they create content around the shared interest, which is social cause, social impact. It's identifying that shared interest and building around that. And almost I see the future of content being that like your products come second. Mm-hmm. And I could talk about community forever because it makes me so excited. And I think there's so much on the horizon that brands should or could be doing.
Yeah. But do you think brands get it wrong a little bit? Like you said, communities become a bit of a buzzword. Do you think there's a bit of a misunderstanding of what it is in marketing?
Yeah, I think that, and I think it was in the Tumblr State of Community report, which is like a free report on their website for 2024. They have a piece talking about how, don't quote me on this, you guys listening will have to go and check, but something like 70 or 80% of Gen Z and millennials can like see through brand personas and what they're sharing online, and almost when they try too hard to connect, they find it really cringe. Mm-hmm. So it's almost that balance between like, okay, well, you need a strategy, it needs to be tactical, but how do you also keep that authentic? So I think brands do get it wrong, but it's also hard to get right.
Yeah.
I think that Refi Beauty are one of the greatest examples of community in 2024 and previously. Mm-hmm. And just, I don't know, I feel like I can feel through their content that me as a consumer, customer, community member, like I just know that I'm prioritized in those internal meetings, and like I'm on their brains and they're thinking about me when they're making marketing or product decisions. And I don't know how they do it. Their team are just magic.
Yeah.
But I think they're a really good example of it's clear from start to finish. They're not thinking about them, they're thinking about you. So brands get it wrong, but it is hard to get right. So I understand.
Yeah, definitely. And just coming back to you growing Pretty Little Marketer again, was there like a big moment or a highlight that you thought, oh, wow, this has really become something? Like one that sticks in your mind maybe, or a couple?
So many. I currently at the time of filming, I live in Cheltenham, which is southwest, and there's not many people there. It's not a big town. And I was in my local Primark, and I think this was like 3 years ago. So PLM was about a year old. And I was actually buying a pack of pants, which was exciting. And I remember I was in the queue and I got a tap on the shoulder. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, is that, if I stepped in something, like why? I'm an introvert, I'm an anxious little girl. So, to be tapped on the shoulder in public, I didn't know what was going on. And I turned around and it was this lovely girl and she was like, are you Sophie? And I was like, I am Sophie. And she was like, I follow you on Instagram. And that like moment where what I do on my phone merged with like just me nipping into town and buying a pack of pants.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it reminded me that, and I guess for everyone listening as marketers, that like what you do on these screens is so much bigger than just that. So that was a really cool moment, and paired with like anytime I host one of our PLM events, just this reminder that, oh, there are people that see what I do online and that they believe in it enough to, take a Friday evening out of their week and show up, not for me, but for themselves and for their peers as well. And I cry at most of my events. But yeah, just that like merging of digital and physical, I think is a reminder every time.
Yeah, definitely. And, you've built an incredible personal brand as well, kind of around, there's obviously Pretty Little Marketer, but you also have your own personal brand on LinkedIn. And what's your biggest piece of advice for others in building that? Like, what have you done to kind of create this following and thought leadership that you have?
Oh, good question. I like immediately want to say like, be yourself and be authentic. And I'm sure all of you have read that so many times before, and it's so true, but really unactionable. So like my growth strategy in summary is I use a reach and a nurture strategy, and I work with this with clients. I use this for PLM, but particularly for my personal brand where I can really kind of test and see what topics people like. So having a real intentional split of your personal brand content, again, on LinkedIn, this works really well because whether we like it or not, everyone has an opinion and they like sharing it. So reach content for me looks like, we're going to talk about de-influencing and underconsumption core today. I have thoughts and opinions on that. Every other marketer does too. So like regularly incorporating content that's like opinion based. 1, it's great for reach. 2, it's great for engagement. But 3, you then become this facilitator and conversation starter. I think what a lot of people get wrong, unmistakably, when it comes to building their personal brand is almost broadcasting rather than hosting. So using something like reach content to give someone something to band together around. They can talk with you, they can talk with your community. But then you've also got your nurture content. So I want to be known as someone that makes social media simple. So nurturing for me looks like the content that's going to do that, breaking down what I think about a certain term or a trend, or, sharing my own strategies in a simple way. So seeing yourself as like this, your own brand universe, I suppose, and being a facilitator and host rather than someone that broadcasts. So I hope there's a bit more actionable than just be authentic, but equally, if you can be yourself online, that's the golden rule, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good, like, simple way of looking at it. But even the thing you said of reach and nurture and having a clear idea of what it is that you want to be sharing and how you're going to get people to kind of respond to that. And I notice as well that you do a lot of like, you reply to people in the comments, which seems like a very simple thing, but it is so important, again, where it's a real person behind it. And do you think as well, because I have noticed with LinkedIn a little bit, especially recently, and I think the rise of like AI and ChatGPT and things, that there's a lot of people often talking about the same things and things tend to go viral, that I think you can really tell when it's someone's real thoughts and when they've maybe just sort of jumped on a bit of a bandwagon of what's popular. So
absolutely. One of my biggest peeves is like the AI comments on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've seen any or had them in your comment sections, where someone will use AI, which is a great tool and a great assistant, to essentially repeat your post back to you in a comment. And I find it really frustrating seeing not just creators but brands almost use commenting as like this tick off the to-do list. And it was you're going to find out in today's episode that I'm like the biggest nerd, and I like love reports, I love articles. It was Hootsuite's social media trends 2025 report that came out this week in November, where they talk about like how comment sections are going to be like so big in 2025 and why and how brands should be prioritizing it. So knowing that like the stats are showing how important they are is so frustrating, seeing creators and brands alike just use it as a tick box exercise rather than, I don't know, like appreciate it for its full relationship building potential. So AI is great, but keep it out the comment sections.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Okay, so I want to go on to our first trend that we're going to be talking about, which is Underconsumption Core. So I know you were quite keen to talk about this one as well. So what is your understanding of Underconsumption Core?
I love Underconsumption Core, and the influencing I feel like bundles into all of it. And the way I see it and digest it is creators, whether that's bigger influencers, or I saw Vogue label smaller influencers as like normies, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Telling you things that you shouldn't buy. You know, maybe it's a trending makeup product and they're sharing a honest review rather than a sponsored post, or it's someone taking them through, you know, a day in the life. And my coffee cup has a chip in it rather than this perfectly polished, you know, Hermes tea on like the perfect platter, and this reflection of just normal life rather than this super polished persona that we often see online.
Yeah, and I think you're right that it's often connected to, we saw de-influencing was a trend, like I think early 2023.
Yeah.
They often seem to come about, I've noticed, after Christmas.
Yes.
So I think we'll probably see something else.
Definitely.
Like maybe a new name for it, but it will be a similar thing. And I know a few years ago it was anti-haul.
Yes.
If you'd ever heard of that, where people were like, you know, these are the things I'm not going to be buying. And yeah, I think under Consumption Core, it was kind of similar, of people sharing ways that they are not consuming as much.
Yeah.
So even as simple as like cutting the end of a shampoo bottle to make sure that you've got all the product out of it, or to, you know, rather than clothes throwing away and buying new ones, actually tailoring them or kind of making repairs to them as opposed to going and buying new ones. And yeah, how are you seeing people sharing their views, or like the ways that they're kind of engaging with Underconsumption Core on TikTok specifically?
I think it's great. And I again, going back to the comment sections being big in 2025 and beyond, as soon as I have a thought or a response to a post, I run to the comment section to see, like, are people affirming this thought? What are other people saying? And I really appreciate the kind of sentiment around it. And like looking in those comment sections, people are really here for it. They appreciate it. I saw a video recently, and it was just someone going through their makeup collection, and they were like, I have one bottle of foundation and it's so dirty, and I have one eyeshadow palette, but these three have run out and this one's broken. And even myself watching that, knowing that my makeup bag has had many liquid explosions in there too, and then seeing that in the comments, like, I feel so seen, like, OMG me. And then also strategically, like, being able to send that to someone, like, you know, my best friend, whenever we go away, if she ever gets something out of my makeup bag, you're going to need a tissue. It's going to be messy. So it's an opportunity, you know, for her to send it to me or tag me in a comment as well. So I really love the sentiment around it, and it's like a nice community builder too.
Yeah. And who do you think are like the biggest drivers of these sort of Underconsumption Core, de-influencing, anti-haul? Like, who do we tend to see talking about it?
I definitely see it more in like nano and micro creators. I think Alex Earle is quite an interesting case study on one, how like normal and real she is. I remember watching a video of hers a while back, and it was just her like flat tour, but there were clothes everywhere. There was things everywhere. It was super messy. So like feeling really seen in that sense that like, oh, a busy creator, that like it's not perfect all the time. But then there's almost that like juxtaposition of like, there's like a Gucci dress on the ground. There's like, you know, Louboutins everywhere. And like, that's your mess. Like my mess is the dishwasher hasn't been done all day. So I think it's interesting to see larger creators who do live a more like luxe and lavish lifestyle being real, de-influencing, anti-hauling, but how that still looks really different to like the everyday consumer. So I definitely see it more from smaller accounts. I love it when I click through on someone's content and they've got like 4,000 followers, but they're like killing it. Their videos are awesome. So I think Alex Earle is a good example, but in a different way, and how she goes against the grain of like luxury creator / celeb hybrid models now. But smaller creators are definitely leading the way, particularly on TikTok, rather than other platforms.
Yeah, and because I agree. I think that the slight difference between like underconsumption core and maybe de-influencing is de-influencing was influencers saying these are the things that I wouldn't recommend you buy. So I always thought it was interesting the way it's called de-influencing, because you're still influencing.
Yes.
You're just influencing on what not to buy rather than what to buy. But whereas underconsumption core, yeah, it feels more like a kind of partly driven by, I think, you know, environmentalism and sustainability, but also, like you say, being a bit more relatable of like, I think we live in a world now with social media where we're always watching influencers and they always seem to have the newest thing and the newest product and the best makeup, and their apartment tours, everything looks perfect. And for the majority of people, that's just not reality at all. So it's kind of got that second layer to it where I think it's people saying it's okay if your makeup bag is a bit disorganized and messy, and you know, you don't have to have the newest clothes just because that's what's trending. Like the average person can't afford that. Because that was actually one criticism I did see a little bit aimed at sort of underconsumption core, where some TikTok users were saying in comments, well, this isn't a choice for me. Like I, you know, financially can't afford certain things. So do you think there's ever a risk that we're sort of like, what's the word, kind of putting a name to make it sound fashionable, glorifying, I guess, when actually for a lot of people, that's just their reality?
Oh, I love that thought. And I think as a marketer, it can be so easy, can't it, to look and be like, well, this is trending and this is why. But when you strip it back, we're just people watching other people. And I think you're so right. There's that fine line between like normalizing something, but then glamorizing it instead. So I love that thought. And I would totally agree.
Yeah, I think it was one I saw where it was an influencer and she was sharing some of her underconsumption core tips. And, you know, it was things like you cutting the shampoo bottle to get the last bit out, or certain things like that. And yeah, there were a few comments that were people being like, well, this isn't a trend for me. Like that's my life, because I don't have enough, you know, money to pay my rent. So I have to do those kind of things. So yeah, it definitely sometimes makes you aware of, like, as marketers, that there's these trends and aesthetics and things, but also to sometimes be conscious that for some people that could be sensitive, maybe. And, you know, what do you think it tells us as well about all of these trends, de-influencing, underconsumption core? What do you think they tell us about kind of Gen Z attitudes as well, compared to maybe millennials or older generations?
I really love, and I say I'm a Gen Z baby, but I'm like right in the middle. Like if I was born a week earlier, I probably would have Yes. Yeah. Is that what I'm called?
Yeah, apparently it's a new term. Zillennial is kind of like when you're in between, so you don't really identify as like a full Gen Z, but you don't really identify as millennial. You're kind of just in the middle.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Sophie's a zillennial now. I like it. But one thing I really appreciate about Gen Z is this like determination to not just be who they are, but also find who they are as well. I had a really quite deep conversation with my best friend recently, and I've been kind of like shopping for my autumn-winter wardrobe, as I do every year.
Yeah.
And we were like going around the shops, and I was like, I actually don't know what I like. And I think this was August time as well. And we were joking and we were like, haha, like no one's posted an outfit for me to save yet. And almost this moment of self-reflection of like, oh, like if Molly May doesn't wear it, like what am I going to wear on Christmas Day? And like, I really appreciate how Gen Z have that almost like anti-attitude towards that.
There's sort of listening to what's trending, I guess, and like basing what you like around maybe what's trending, which maybe could leave people feeling like they don't actually know what they themselves like, maybe.
And I think especially post-pandemic, and I know that like everything comes back to that 1 to 2 years we were all stuck inside, but I think we all had so much self-reflection time in that. And I think that especially for like younger Gen Z, when like you're not at school being influenced by your peers and you probably are spending more time online. And that I know for me was quite a huge catalyst of like, I'm actually tired of seeing all these hauls. Like I'm tired of, I'm not going anywhere for the next year, but I feel like I have to walk, not run to buy this jumper before it sells out, and almost zooming out of, well, I actually don't need it because I'm not going anywhere, or I have one already. So I think the pandemic, especially for me, really accelerated that. So yeah, I really love that Gen Z attitude of like, well, like it's cool that you do that, but actually like I want to buy this, even if it's not cool. So yeah, I aspire to be more like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it feels like Gen Z are quite, they're much more vocal about sort of the environment and things. Although I did read recently that Shein, I think it was Shein, have had like their biggest financial year ever, which I found very interesting because obviously we do, I think, tend to think of Gen Z as being like more sustainable and but it's like, is that true? Or do we sort of do we act the way we think, the way we believe? There's a difference between what we say and what we do.
Absolutely.
And maybe they're more vocal about these trends, but actually are a lot of them living by them, or are a lot of them living by still buying a new outfit for every weekend kind of night out? But yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And have you seen any brands kind of getting involved in these types of trends, or specifically Underconsumption Core or de-influencing?
I think that Odd Muse is a really good example of this. I love all of their content, and they have more collections now because they're a growing brand. But Odd Muse was started by a girl called Amy who left her role at ASOS to invest in her own business because she wanted to create a brand that were like little luxuries. It's a capsule wardrobe. You can purchase 4 of these pieces, build 8 outfits and wear them for the next year. And despite their growth, I think they're like set to turn over, or maybe they have already made like 20 million this year already. The growth in the story is amazing. But despite all of that, the message has always been like, this is just a capsule collection. And, if we brought out a red dress last season, we're not going to do it again because we've given you one. And each collection is designed to go with the last collection. So I love how almost like curated and intentional what they do there is. So not particularly sitting down and filming like a Underconsumption Core video, but I think their values really beautifully reflect that notion of Underconsumption Core, and that comes through really clearly through their content. So I think they're a really great example.
I love that. I don't think I've actually heard of
Odd Muse. So
yeah, I need to go and check them out because I love that. And I do remember quite a few years ago, maybe when I was at uni actually, there was a real trend for like capsule wardrobes for a while of like, you just should have sort of 10 great pieces and you can mix and match kind of thing. And I feel like I tried to do it and then I just sort of gave up after a while. And then what brand would you like to see doing something around this trend or doing it more?
Ooh, so many. I think the biggest one for me would be like any part of Boohoo Group. And I know it's tricky around fast fashion and even like smaller makeup brands like Revolution, I think are like a really cool brand. But every time there's a trending like MAC, NARS, like a luxury high-end piece, they are the first to come out with a dupe, which one, great because it's affordable, but two, like, are we just pushing people to purchase things they don't need because it's like, it's selling out quick, you know? Every time there's a limited edition Stanley Cup, I've got two at home. If you show me another pink one, I'm probably going to buy it. But if brands could reflect and slow down, like, could we too? Which, you know, we live in a profit-driven world, so I it is wishful thinking. But I would love to see, like, Boohoo Group, Pretty Little Thing, any of those brands. Imagine if they just launched, like, one winter capsule collection. And, you know, they have hundreds, thousands of consumers, so maybe it's a big collection and there are still a few thousand pieces, but rather than a website being updated with 600, 800 new products a day.
That's crazy, isn't
it's
it?
wild,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Wild. 600 a day. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I guess, yeah, the problem is it is that balance, isn't it? Of that there are lots of places that do release less, but they tend to be much more expensive. Like I'm thinking sort of your Reese, your Whistles.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people can't afford that, especially younger people. You know, if you're at university, you're not going to spend £300 on a coat. So they need to look for these other options. But then I think those fast fashion feel that because they don't have maybe the same quality, they've got to have so much choice, when actually it would be nice to see them pull it back a little bit.
Absolutely.
And just, I would love to see if I think that would be great if like Pretty Little Thing or Boohoo release, like, we're doing a winter capsule, you know, maybe even 50 items or 100 items, but for the season, for like the next few months. Like, it'd be so great to see that.
I know Boohoo tried something, not necessarily something similar, but they did like a collaboration with Kourtney Kardashian. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. And it was, I think it was like recycled pieces or like vintage pieces, and it was all centered around denim. And I remember like the main message was like, it's sustainable. And the amount of backlash they had, and I mean, interesting partnership anyway. But even like people see through it. So I almost wonder, like, even if they did do that, would people still see through it? And it always, like, as marketers, we know, like, it always just comes back from like the heart of that business. And going back to Refi, for example, I feel prioritized. I see their values. But for larger companies where, you know, profit over people and profit comes first, we've seen it with Victoria's Secret, for example. They've tried to change. Or Abercrombie, I don't know if you saw that Netflix documentary, and they did so much internally. You know, they got rid of people, they did a whole overhaul. And Abercrombie, I think they're doing great now.
I think they are. I really like Abercrombie, actually. And they did address, I think, a lot of the concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. But how much and how long did that take? And I think if you don't have like a CEO or a C-suite that are like, we don't care if we're going to lose money here, like we have to do something for our customers, like it's just going to fall to the bottom of the pile. So I wish it was different.
And I do sometimes think this, I mean, it's going slightly off topic, but I think it's interesting, that I think it is a challenge, because for someone like Boohoo, I guess maybe they felt that they did attempt to sort of, they're attempting to make some steps, like with that partnership with Kourtney Kardashian, if they released a capsule kind of wardrobe or something. But would people still criticize them then for that? So it's like but then if we're wanting them to change, we've got to also accept that it's not going to happen overnight. A Boohoo is not going to, you know, magically turn into a different company overnight. It also employs thousands of people. So they've got to think about that they are employing loads of people. So yeah, it's an interesting one where we've kind of got to give them the space, I guess, to make those changes.
Yeah, and I think this is why Underconsumption Core and de-influencing are so much bigger than trends, but movements, because, if we as a collective, if we just buy the pieces we need every year, then brands aren't going to have the money to keep mass producing. So they are going to strip back for better or for worse. So, and I know, again, as a marketer, it's so easy to look at brands and be like, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? But like, change starts with the consumers. So I think from like anti-horse to de-influencing to underconsumption core, I think we're going to see, and especially Gen Z and millennials, but like even my mum, now my mum is a Temu victim. She discovered Temu through an ad and she hasn't looked back. But I know that like she has friends who used to shop at like Boohoo or PLT, AliExpress, all of like the quick grab and buy, who are now like, well, actually, I don't want these things anymore. So like extending from Gen Z and millennials, but we're almost like a product of our habits, aren't we? So that self-reflection on, well, what can I do to see the change I want to see? And I think Underconsumption Core is like the perfect example of that movement starting and how I hope it evolves in the future, and how brands, like, they have to react because, the audience are doing so much about it. So yeah, I hope it continues to fire.
I love that. Well, I think that closes that one out really nicely. And then now we'll go on to the second trend, which I know we were both excited to talk about as well, because we've got a lot of opinions, which is tradwife. So yeah, can you give listeners, viewers, a bit of an overview of your understanding of what the tradwife community or trend is?
I think this is fascinating. I love watching the videos, and I was watching a video on my way up actually talking about how like trad wives are nothing new. So a trad wife is a wife or a girlfriend, a partner who lives and runs their household by what some would call like traditional household values. So adhering to that classic or societal gender split in a household. And tradwives on TikTok, they film that and share it through their content.
Yeah, I think that's very well explained. And do you follow any tradwife influencers? You said you watch quite a few of the videos.
Yeah, I really love Nara Smith, actually. And
I love Nara Smith.
Oh, isn't she? Her voice, I could like listen to it to go to sleep. She soothes me. And I know we'll get into this as well, but like the evolution of her brand and like the audience perception of her, I think, as a case study is so interesting. So Nara Smith is obviously, who doesn't follow her? And then Ballerina Farm as well. I know that's like on our list to talk about, but I think she's cute. I think she's sweet and an interesting case study too. So Nara and Ballerina Farm are the two for me. But I know there are, like, especially in America, there are so many. Like, you don't have to follow those two. You've got 1,000 other options.
Yeah. And what do you think the trend signifies? Like, why has this... Because as you said, tradwife, the idea of a tradwife, I guess, has been around for forever.
Yeah.
But and people have been creating that kind of content, but specifically on TikTok and Instagram and social media, like, why do you think this has blown up so much this year?
I think the controversial nature of it. I love that term. I don't know if it has been put in the dictionary or not. I could just be making that up, but that thought of whataboutisms, I don't think that's in the dictionary. I think I just saw it online somewhere.
It sounds like it could be.
And how, like, we're in this era now where we consume content and it's immediately like, well, what about? So, I'm here in my pink jumper and there someone will be like, well, what about blue jumpers? Why are you not wearing a blue jumper? And social media almost like amplifies all of these thoughts, which one makes for great education and great conversation, but two can also cause a lot of controversy as well. And, when it comes to traditional or societal gender roles, if you're sharing that on TikTok, well, there are 100 million people on TikTok, if not more, every day, every month. And everyone's going to have a thought or opinion on that. So I think that's kind of like styloed on social media. So I think, yeah, the controversial nature of it. On my For You page over the past week, I've seen loads of rage bait food videos. I don't know if you've seen that one creator, and they're like, what I feed my 2-year-old for breakfast. And it will be like 13 Jaffa cakes and, I don't know, like spaghetti, or maybe it's a McDonald's. And like, it's not...
So they're inviting the comments, basically.
So it's not real. At least I hope it's not. I don't think it is. But it's like created almost like a modern day clickbait. It's rage bait. It gets you going. So I think that when it comes to trad wife, you know, when you're talking anything societal values, that's shifted so much over the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So I think that controversial nature of it. But too, especially post lockdown, I think that we, or definitely me, I'm so intrigued to see what other people get up to, because we were so like in our own bubbles during that year, 2 years, however long it was for you, experiencing the pandemic. So to be able to get insight, and I think it's why we love like day in the life videos too, getting insight into what other people do, I think that we're really into. So I think, one, that controversial nature of it kind of amplifies it even more. Everyone's talking about it. But two, that like intrigue and curiosity to know like, oh, well, what do other people do? Which again is quite juxtaposing, because it's controversial because we're not open to it, we disagree. But then we're intrigued because we want to learn more and it might inspire us. So it's that like tricky relationship with social media, isn't it? But those would be the two things for me.
And a lot of people seem to say as well that it's quite comforting to watch in a weird way. And I don't know if it's because, you know, there's a lot of conversations around women now, a lot of women feeling very burnt out and feeling very tired, because I guess historically there were these very traditional gender roles, and that's kind of, while some people still have that, that's shifted a lot. But there's still being a lot of conversations that women are now working full time, but also still picking up, I think it's around 85% was the last stat I read, of childcare and house care. And so do you think there's a little bit where there's something quite fascinating for women being like, even though I maybe wouldn't want to live like this, after I've had a hard day at work, I can watch a TikTok of a woman baking a cake and serving her family this lovely dinner, and almost like a weird, it's like a double life of like, that's what my life would have, if I'd been born in the 50s, that's what my life would have been like. And there's definitely positives and negatives to that as well.
It's almost like it's a luxury, isn't it? I wrote a post recently about how we're seeing more food in marketing. So like Hailey Bieber and Rhode.
Oh, yeah.
You know, every lip balm, it's like a raspberry lip balm or like a cinnamon bun lip balm. And all the imagery is like with a juicy cinnamon bun.
And like luxury fashion brands have been doing partnerships, right? They did like a Greg's sausage roll handbag or something weird.
And the Burberry campaign on TikTok, where they've got like Cara Delevingne making a cup of tea. And how like these normal everyday tasks of like having the time to look after your children or make a meal from scratch, it's a luxury now. So almost, that reflection of like your own life. And I love watching like luxury unboxings. Can I afford a Birkin? No. Would I like to? Yes.
Yeah.
Will I watch them on TikTok all the time without second thought? Absolutely. So even though for a woman or a parent to be able to just spend time with their kids, make a home-cooked meal, frolic around the garden in a nice dress, it's a luxury. And almost it's the same reason why we watch movies, isn't it? It's that escapism and being able to just go on TikTok and, well, I can forget about my day of work and I can live through Nara Smith making bubblegum from scratch, even though I would never be able to.
Yeah. And I think a lot of them are quite tongue-in-cheek. You know, they're like Nara Smith. I know it's still a debate of, is this satire or is it not? I'm pretty sure it's satire. But it is like, it's quite tongue-in-cheek. No one's actually making bubble gum from scratch for their children. But I think the way that she sort of goes, today my husband asked me for you know, a fresh, I don't know, some fresh bubble gum or something, or from the popcorn from scratch, and I've made it all, and then her doing it. I think it's a little bit playful, and it's kind of making fun of it a bit. But obviously there has been a lot of concerns around the trad wife trend and what it represents and the stereotypes, but also like these unrealistic expectations for women. And I know, you know, the ballerina farm, that's a very popular TikTok, but it had some controversial articles. What do you think about all of that and like the negative sides of the trad wife trend?
I think it, for me, goes back to like social media literacy. And I don't know if anyone listening has a parent that's like addicted to Facebook Reels. My mum, she's a Temu victim. She's a Facebook Reels victim. I saw a really funny thing actually about how like Facebook to boomers or Gen X is what like TikTok is to Gen Z. Because I will see a TikTok and that's my truth now. Like, I don't need your sources. I will believe you. So like whenever my mum sends me an article, I'll have to be like, oh, this is like 5 years old, mum. Like, it's been disproved. And I think a lot of it for me, reflecting on that like controversy and the negative effects, goes back to like the social media literacy. And I think as marketers, we have this like unique ability to see something like with Nara Smith and know like, okay, well, she's written a script. Like, her kids haven't asked her for freshly baked toast at 3 a.m. Like, she's not doing these things. But for an average consumer that doesn't have marketing insight or background, well, like watching Nara Smith provide for her husband as soon as he asks for a meal. Oh my goodness, well, Nara Smith has millions of followers. She's clearly doing something right. So do I need to do that? So I think, again, it's that hard balance between, do we have like a self-responsibility to be vigilant when we're consuming things online, but also like as a marketer, as a creator, as someone who posts for brands, and maybe it's just my passion for like people and community, recognizing that like as influencers, like you have a responsibility as well to protect the people that are consuming your content. So, and for me, like the Nara Smith and ballerinas of the internet are what Victoria's Secret was for me when I was growing up and like watching their fashion shows. And then like I'd be getting changed, looking in the mirror, wondering why at 13 I don't look like Gigi Hadid, who has like a expensive trainer and incredible jeans and all of these things that I don't have. But the impact that had on my kind of self-worth and how I saw myself was huge. And I know that I am not alone in that by any means. So I think like that social media literacy is so important, but no one talks about it. So yeah, it's hard because, again, as a marketer, I know that Ballerina Farm, like that's a whole production.
Well, this is the thing, is that they, ironically, a lot of these trad wife influencers, they have a job. Their job is being an influencer.
Yes.
Nara Smith is making a lot of money, I'm sure. You know, she's done huge partnerships with brands. I know she did that famous one with Marc Jacobs. And clearly it is a production, like you say, the Ballerina Farm one. So they are actually they're not a traditional wife in that way, because they're creating content. That's their job. And so clearly they are positioning it in a certain way. But I do understand the concerns that I think, especially with, you know, the world as it is right now. And I worry that there's maybe like a backlash to the fact that women have come really far. And it's like people wanting, oh, wasn't it better when it was the 50s and you had your wife cooking you a nice meal to come home to? So I can understand the worries and the concerns. And like you say, do women watch it and think, how is she looking after 6 children and she looks beautiful and she's got her hair all done and she's made this amazing meal from scratch and I haven't even had time to like wash my face today. So I can sort of see both sides. But I think, like you say about the social literacy, is that a lot of people are watching it, I think, as a bit of an escapism, not taking it overly seriously. There's been loads of hilarious responses. I saw one of I can't remember her name, but the creator she does like funny, what's the word? Like parodies of a trad wife, where she'll be like, today my husband asked me for, you know, a home cooked, some home cooked, freshly baked cookies. And I thought, where the fuck does he get off? And then she's like, I told him to shut up.
Yeah.
I sent him out. He picked me up at McDonald's and I ate it in bed. And like, just really sort of, she does these hilarious responses. So yeah, I think it's an interesting trend, and it says a lot about how people are kind of responding to those trends as well. And have you seen any brands working with trad life influencers? What's your thought? Is there a risk for brands as well working with such a controversial topic?
Yeah, I obviously that classic one of Nara Smith and Marc Jacobs, and I know there was a lot of controversy around like the concept of the video and people, and like an individual creator had done it before, and that conversation, rightly so, but almost like took over the
other conversation.
Yeah, like the partnership. So I think that that's probably the biggest one. And I think working with any creator ever is always a risk for brands, but no risk, no reward. And I was part of a Hootsuite campaign this week, where they sent us out magazines, but like massive magazines, and like 7 or 8 of us posted them on LinkedIn. And whenever Hootsuite do these campaigns, like people always talk about it, whether it's like, this is awesome, it's so cool, like B2B influencing, or there's also posts that are like, oh, there's another campaign, it's all over my homepage. And I remember I saw Eileen, who's one of their social media leads, comment on someone else's post complaining about people complaining. And she was just like, hey, people are talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously within boundaries of like who we're working with and what the conversation is and the impact it's having, like that needs to be focus number 1. But 2, like, hey, people are talking about it, so how can that be a good thing? And I think like PR crisis and managing that is gonna be greater for the brands with experience. Like Marc Jacobs, they've been around for decades. I'm sure they're no stranger to things going wrong. But then if you're a smaller brand, then perhaps you do need to be a bit more careful there. So yeah, I think it, like as with everything in marketing, it depends like who, what, when, where, why. But that comment from Eileen of like, hey, people are talking about it, like has really stuck with me this week. So
you can't please everyone,
absolutely,
ultimately. And and I think for brands with something like the trad wife trend, I do agree it's probably a very controversial area, and you can see why a lot of brands would be worried about stepping into it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of brands, maybe if they approached it in a way as well that was that more tongue-in-cheek, you know, slightly sort of humorous aspect, and kind of I think that's fine, because, you know, clearly people are enjoying it. It gets, yes, it's getting its controversy, but it's also getting loads of people who really enjoy that content. Otherwise it wouldn't be popular. So there is clearly something there for people. I think brands probably just, have to tread very carefully.
Yeah, definitely.
And is there a brand you'd love to see do something in the trad wife?
I feel like fashion, food or beauty would be like an obvious choice. I know Love Shack Fancy. I don't know if you've seen them on social media before.
No.
They, like, if you picture what a trad wife would wear, like a floaty floral dress, they like embody that. Like all of their collections are floaty, floral. They collaborated with Stanley Cups. I think they've done it once or twice now. And if like a trad wife was a product, it would be the Love Shack Fancy Stanley Cup. So I think it could be cool. Maybe not Stanley, because I know they collaborate with so many creators, but like Yeti or a competitor partnering with someone like Nara Smith, that could be so cool. Or I don't know. I would love something more out of the box.
Yeah, I just had a thought that I'd love to see like a trad wife holiday. So maybe like
cool.
an Airbnb or like a EasyJet would be really funny to see them like do something with. And what does a trad wife holiday look like? That would be quite, I think that'd be interesting.
Oh, Airbnb would be awesome, wouldn't it? Like showcasing all the kitchens and I don't know, like imagine Nara Smith on like a wood-fired oven versus camping versus like a gas stove in like a really sleek Elon Musk style mansion. Oh, that could be Airbnb if you're listening.
We'll reach out to them maybe.
We'll be in touch.
And do you think the tradwife community and trend is going to keep growing in 2025?
Absolutely. I think people are talking about it, aren't they? So it makes sense that it's only going to continue to grow. People are talking about it, so it's not going to go anywhere. I would love to see, like you said, like more parody content. Like even the Nara Smith and Marc Jacobs. I love how they played on her, like getting something out of the oven, and like she got a Marc Jacobs bag out of the oven. Like it obviously wasn't made in the oven. So I would love to see like more spins on that. So yeah, I'm interested to see where that's gonna go. And obviously we had was it Secret Lives of Mormon Wives as well, who I don't know if you'd bunch them under trad wives.
Yeah, they definitely have similarities though. Yeah, I would say.
And how people like were so interested in that. There's like I think it was Hulu. There's like a whole Hulu documentary. And I think, again, it goes back to that, like, one, escapism, as you said, but two, that curiosity. Like, I love watching Up. I love watching the Kardashians, not because I'm ever gonna own a Bentley or a mansion.
You might, personal marketing, keep growing.
True. Everyone follow PLM.
Yeah.
Make my dreams come true. But like it is that escapism, isn't it? So yeah, I'd be really interested to see, like, especially Nara Smith and Ballerina Farm. Like, are they going to be on Hulu? Like, are we going to see Ballerina Farm and their 8 kids at Fashion Weeks? I wrote a post on my train here actually about creator celebrities and that blurred line between, you know, Addison Rae being a TikToker, but then she was on the Met steps. Now she has an album. She's touring with Charlie XCX, which is like the biggest artist right now. Like, are trad wives gonna, like, is that the next step there? I think there's a lot of potential there. I love things like that.
Yeah. And then finally, I just want to finish with a couple of general questions as we've been talking about TikTok related trends. How do you think TikTok specifically has evolved this year in the way that people are using it? And what do you think we'll see next year?
Oh, I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. I think everyone does. And what I find so interesting about TikTok is, especially since 2020, which I guess is when it really started booming, how, like, that is the place that sets trends. So, you know, the demure and mindful, that came from one video, well, a series of videos by Jules. But then if you use demure or mindful in a Instagram note, it would be a different colour. Or I remember seeing, like, brands thread about it on, would you call it threading on Threads? I guess so.
I guess, yeah.
So one thing I really love about TikTok is, like, how it is the place to set trends. And obviously that's not going anywhere. So I'm interested to see, like, how that is amplified next year and beyond. I hosted a webinar this week with someone from SEMrush, who are a B2B kind of like a SaaS marketing tool, and I asked what they think is coming next on social media, and it was their social media manager called Julia, who's awesome, and she was talking about comment section campaigns, and my mind was blown in that moment. I was like, how cool would that be? And especially somewhere like TikTok, where, you know, when you see a brand in the comment section, you're like, oh, hey, like, Stanley, what are you doing here? And like everyone's having a laugh. And even how there was the video earlier in the year of the girl's car was on fire, but her Stanley Cup survived, and how they left a comment. They bought her a new car because, you know, she posted about it, and how just from that comment section, this whole movement was born. So I think I would love to see more of that next year, particularly on TikTok. So yeah, love how TikTok is like this place where trends are born. I would love to see more brands setting trends rather than following trends, whatever that might look like. And then 2, Julia's thought of like comment section campaigns. How can you use one moment and turn it into something bigger? Almost like UGC, but user-generated whole marketing campaigns. I think that would be cool.
Yeah. And then specifically creators as well. How do you think creator partnerships might evolve?
Yeah, I see a lot online, and I work with a lot of brands as a quote unquote influencer as well. And I've been having some really interesting conversations with brands recently about the two things that they really want to focus on next year, which is one, long-term partnerships. So a lot of the brands approaching me now, like, we don't just want a reel for our new tool. Like, actually, how can we work with you for 6 months? How can we create our own universe together? And, you know, we want to be in your newsletter once a month, but also on LinkedIn once a month. So there's multiple touch points. And then also, I'm working with a few brands at the moment who used to do kind of mass influencer campaigns. So, you know, we've got this budget, we're going to pick 40 influencers. And they've actually got in touch, and we've had conversations around how, you know, for this next 3 months, we're going to have 3 ambassadors, and that's it. So I think, one, long-term partnerships. 2, I've talked about this previously in posts about this thought of going deep, not wide. And I don't know if you saw Poppy at Coachella. They took Alex Earle and they did like Coach Earler.
And they smashed it.
Yeah, and they hosted just Alex and her friends in a house for the week. Alex Earle is now an investor in Poppy. And I know you've got Sebum, Mr. Olympia, who now owns part of Gymshark. So going deep, not wide. And also, again, Alex Earle, Sebum, like owning pieces of the brand. I think going back to that thought of, you know, should brands work with trad wives? Like, how can you mitigate risk? And like, if I owned part of a brand, like, I'm not going to want to do anything that's going to jeopardize that. So that heavy investment in the brand, first and foremost, is like security there, I would hope. But I think that consumers, like, we see through faux partnerships, linking nicely with obviously brands focusing on deep, not wide, long-term partnerships, and kind of having influencers invest in their brands rather than just represent them. So I think those links and relationships are going to need to be clearer and stronger. And yeah, I think my favorite takeaway from that ramble is the deep, not wide. How can you have 3 partners rather than 30 who are going to post a second ad for someone else tomorrow?
Yeah, it feels like it's definitely moving back in that direction. And then final question, just to finish this conversation, what is next for PLM?
Ooh, what is next? That's a question I ask myself every day. I currently have a membership, which is really lovely, and I love our community. But my goal over the next 12 to 24 months is to make PLM an even greater resource, whether that's courses, ebooks, meetups. I know what it's like to be a lonely marketer, and social media is so demanding, and how many teams of one are out there struggling. So more opportunities to connect and more opportunities to learn. For me personally, I'm a team of one. I know we were talking before about how challenging that can be. So internally, that hopefully looks like not being a team of one anymore. But for me, my hope and dream is that PLM, Pretty Little Marketer, can always just be a friend for anyone who follows, whether that's as a passive follower or someone who engages an advocate. I just want to build a comforting space that's helpful for people in and on social media.
I love that. Well, what a great place to end. And thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Of course.
Thank you.